Dr. Akiva Gamliel, Belk, Dean of Jewish Studies at the Noach Torah Institute, LLC. Welcome to Gematria Vayikra Bechukotai. That's Leviticus chapter 26:3 through 27:34. And we're going to be looking at pages 211 to 236 in our textbook, Mysterious Signs of the Torah Revealed in Leviticus. And our subject is Remember the Holy Land. Now, for the last few discussions, we've been centering a little bit on training children. In Parshat Bechar, which we combined this year, Parshat Bechar and Bechukotai together because we're not in a leap year. We don't have an extra month this year, and so they're combined together. We do them separately, but in this week they're combined. So we learned that there's a similarity between counting the 49 days of the Omer in which we arrive at Shavuot and in the Yovel, the year of Jubilee. And we pointed to the Gematria of 570 being tefillin, when a young man puts on tefillin for the first time. And so we discussed how the family needs to be faithful to God, who is faithful to us. And we said God is faithful to bless us, and God is faithful to correct us. And so that's faithfulness. And so when we were talking about this, we were talking about how the Lord brought us from the lowest level of sadness and depression and difficulty to the 50th level. So from the 49th levels of degradation and sinfulness to the 50th level where we were right at perfection. Okay? And so we recognize that 50 is Shavuot. We also recognize that it's Pentecost. They both mean 50. And we recognize that Yovel follows the 7 years times 7. It's the 50th year. And so when we have the 50th year, it's called Yovel, or Jubilee. And in the 50th year, those that have debts are forgiven. In the 50th year, those that have been slaves are released. And the original owners of the land is returned to them. And so what we see here is that in the 50th year, we're to, as the people of Israel, we're to act in an exceptionally special way. And it's based upon the land. And it's based upon 50 years. Now, dear ones, we're asking the question. We're saying, remember the Holy Land. And then we're asking the question, why is the land, or the ground of Israel, holy? Now, to those that claim the people of Israel, that the Hebrew Scriptures are no longer fulfilled, God help us, God forbid. They have no understanding of what it means, of what the purpose, the foundation of the Eretz Kodesh, Israel, the land of Israel, is holy. They don't understand. You see, dear ones, when God says the land, the ground of Israel is holy, that is exactly what God means. And God teaches us that the land of Israel, that the ground of Israel is holy. And when an item is holy, it's separated. So the land of Israel is separated from all the other lands in the world. So now we're just making a statement. God says the land of Israel is holy. God says the ground of Israel is holy. And because God says it's holy, it's separated from all the other lands of the world. Okay, so we've made that statement. But the question is, why is the land, the ground of Israel, holy? Now, we know it's holy because God said it is. But in addition to that, why is the land holy? Well, it's holy because God has set it aside from the other lands by, and here's the big one right here, okay, by establishing observances that specifically pertain to the land of Israel. And when the Jewish people observe these commands, these mitzvot, these laws, that separates the land of Israel from all other land in the world. So to say that the commands of God are done away with, to say that the mitzvot are done away with, it's a terrible misunderstanding. Horrible misunderstanding. You see, when God says that every seventh year is a Shemitah, it's a year where the land cannot be sown. It's a year when harvesting does not take place. That is what God commands of the land of Israel. That every seventh year is a Shemitah. And so we recognize that there's no other land in the world that God remembers in this fashion. And then 7 years times 7 years, it's Yovel. It's the year of Jubilee, in which land that has been sold is returned to the normal owner, and a variety of really very special debts are forgiven, a very special time. And so we recognize that because God has put commands on the land of Israel, a farmer is not to reap the corners of the field. Those are left for the poor and for the widow. And so we recognize there's so many different mitzvot, observances of Torah that pertain to land. Okay? And so the whole point of God remembering the Holy Land, God is remembering the Shemitah, God is remembering the Yovel, God is remembering that the farmer is to not reap the corners of his field. And in so doing, we go to Exodus chapter 3, verse 5, where the Lord God says to Moshe, take off, remove your shoes, for the ground that you're standing on is holy ground. He was standing on the land of Israel. And we have the king that had leprosy. And he came to Israel because he heard there was a prophet there. His name. And he went and dipped in the river 7 times. And his skin became pure. And he changed from worshiping idols and false gods to just wanting to worship the Lord. Now, he didn't convert to Judaism, but he wanted to recognize as a Noachite that the God of Israel is the one and only, that he's the true God. And so he wanted to have his mules draw carts with the land of Israel, with the Holy Land, to take back to where he lived, so he could put that land down, so he could pray on holy ground. And so we see that God is remembering the land of Israel. It's holy. Now, the Gematria for Va'aretz is Kor. Now, the Eskor is 228. That means to remember. And the word Uvarak is to bless. That's 228. And dear ones, the land of Israel is the blessed land. God says that it's a land that flows with milk and honey. And God has told us that on the seventh day we're not to work the land. We're not to take our cattle and to plow land or to do any kind of work. We're to remember the seventh day, to keep it holy, and we're to remember that the land of Israel is holy. So dear ones, this is important because it comes right to the base of what we were talking about as we completed Parshat Behar, and that's faithfulness. God is faithful to us, and in turn, we are required to be faithful to God. And how are we faithful to God? We're faithful to God in the way that we go about observing the 613 mitzvot of HaTorah for the Jewish people and the mitzvah of HaTorah for the people of Noach, the B'nai Noach people. Okay? And so we recognize that we each have these really special and unique responsibilities, and that our responsibilities, when we take them seriously, when we do them, then we're remembering the land of Israel is the Holy Land. And in participating in the observances of HaTorah, observing the mitzvot, or helping to sanctify the ground of Israel, or helping to continue making sure, or helping to guard the sanctity, we're helping to guard the sanctification, we're helping to guard the holiness of the land of Israel. So the next time someone asks, why is the land of Israel holy? The correct answer is, God said it's holy. And the correct answer is, it's holy because Israel is the only land that God has said that the Jewish people have certain responsibilities and obligations to perform on the land. Okay? And as a result, the land of Israel is separated from all other lands in the world. Remember, God blesses us when we observe, when we remember that the land of Israel is holy. Thank you for joining with me.